Okay, good morning. So we are today doing Chav Zayin in the fourth parak of Brachot. But we are up to Chav Vav Beis, and we are at the wide lines, about halfway down the wide lines. So if you recall, we had just said on Friday was that there was a machlekes from Shimon Levi and Bris Chanina as to whether the tefillas were avos tiknum or the tefillas were keneged midim tiknum. We said that fundamentally we know that there's sources to show that the Aves were the ones who were metaken the tefillas, or the tefillas were, and notice the Lashon, right? Tefillas are Aves tiknum, the Aves were metaken the tefillas, and we're adhering to their decrees now, or the tefillas were kneged to midim tiknum. Obviously, the Karban Tamid wasn't metaken the tefillah. But we were attacking the tefillas connected the tmidim once the tmidim stopped. We know the Gemara of a Kama Pei Gimel, right? How did the carbon tamid stop? They stopped as a result of machlokes and Hurkins and Aristobulus. This was when they asked for Chachmas Yavanis, because the old man who used Chachmas Yavanis to explain why they should stop sending up the carbon tamid every day when they would send down some coins. And after they sent the pig, and you remember the Maisa, that's when the carbon tamid stopped being brought. But you see there's a fundamental difference between the way these two things operate. If you say tefillas were aves tiknum, like Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina, then what you're really saying is that the aves were davening, and what we're doing in our davening is essentially keeping already minig avasenu biyadenu, literally minig avasenu biyadenu. But if you say tefillas are neged tmidim tiknum, then what are you really saying? You're really saying that the time that the tefillas were started was a much later period in Jewish history. If the tefillas were connected to midim tiknum, the likelihood then is that what we're saying is that for a long period of time, Jews did not daven. Their tefillas were essentially part of their bringing of the karbanas, but it wasn't that they had set times to daven. So practically, as a matter of history, there would be a very big difference between the two. All right, so we're up to the Gemara, about like I say, halfway down the white lines. The Gemara wants to know, Ve'ezehu mincha gedola, right? What is mincha gedola? Ve'ezehu mincha gedola. Says the Gemara, Mishay shois umechza ulamayla. Mincha gedola starts from 6.5 hours into the day. That's the earliest time that one can daven mincha. Ve'ezehu mincha ketana. What is mincha ketana considered? Mitesha shois umechza ulamayla. Until from 9.5 hours into the day. Meaning, 6.5 hours is 12:30. 9.5 hours is 3:30. So from those two periods, that will be called Mincha Gedola, and that will be called Mincha Ketana. Mincha Gedola is called Mincha Gedola because it's a longer period of time than Mincha Ketana, it's a shorter period of time. Says the Gemara, if you go back to our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda told us in the Mishnah that the Tanakh said Mincha was you could daven until the Arab, you could daven until sunset. Rabbi Yehuda said Aplaga Mincha. Rabbi Yehuda says you could daven until half of Mincha. What did Rabbi Yehuda mean when he said you could daven until half of Mincha? Rabbi Yehuda plag Mincha Kama Kamar, or plag Mincha Achrona Kamar. Was he talking about Mincha Gedela, that you could daven until half of that? Or does he mean you could daven until half of Mincha Achrona, meaning until half of Mincha Ketana? What would Mincha Ketana be? Now again, it would be from 3:30 until sunset. When is sunset? Again, we're talking about a regular 12-hour day. So we have from 3:30 until 6. 3:30 until 6 is 2.5 hours. So half of that would be an hour and 15 minutes, which would be from 3:30 to 4:45. So when Rabbi Yehuda would say you have until Plaga Mincha, it means he would say that you could daven Mincha until 4:45. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you could daven Meir from then on. Right, so you ever heard of going to a Plag Minyan? People sometimes do a Plag Minyan, right? For Mincha Meir, that's based on Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that you could daven Mincha until Plag, and then after that you could daven Meir, even though it's still the day in terms of the fact that the sun hasn't set. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you're already allowed to daven Meir. So the Gemara says, which one are we talking about? We're talking about Plag Mincha of Mincha Gedala or Plag Mincha Mechitana? So the Gemara says, Tashma, bring your proof. It's obvious to Tanya, you have a brisa that says, Rabbi Yehuda, I'm at Plaga Mincha Achrona Amru. When we say Plag Mincha, we mean Plag Mincha of the second Mincha. He Yud Aleph Shois Chaser Revia, and that is 11 hours, meaning 5 o'clock, minus a quarter, so that's how you get 4:45. So at this stage of the Gemara, we have it relatively clear that mincha, according to Rabbi Yehuda, can be done until plag of mincha Kana, which is 4:45. And the Rabbanan would disagree. The Rabbanan would say you have until there, if you have until sunset. So now the Gemara wants to go back to finish up a point that we had just dealt with on Friday, which is you have a machlokes Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon Levi as to whether or not the tefillas were obvious, it's tefillas tamidin. So which one was it? So the Gemara says we just spent all this time showing you about all the times that you have until daven, and that you have based upon the amount of time for their karbanis. Why was Ma'ariv allowed to be done all night? Because they were plugged padarim when line is acting there. We were craving b'chim kol. Why did you have from shachris until chatzais? Right, or until Arba Shas was because of the carbon tum and how long it was brought. Same with mincha. So you see, it has much more to do with the tamida and much more to do with karbanis than it does with the others. So the Gemara says, "Name what to have it to yufta Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina." So let's say that this upshlugs, that this throws off the position of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina that you see that all the tefillos were connected to tamidin. He says, no. When I'm saying to you that the tefillas were avos tiknum, it doesn't mean to the exclusion of karbanis. No. What I mean to say is tefillas avos tiknum, the avos were matakin the tefillas, and that means to say that that's the source. That's how we know about it. That's how it got started. But the Rabbanan then tied it into the karbanis in terms of giving you specific structure, in terms of giving you the time, and all of the like. That is the Rabbanan's addition. They were soymech that tefillas that the avos were already metaken onto karbanis. The Eloy because Rabbi Yisrael had to say it, because if he didn't say it, then tefillas most of Rabbi Yisrael man tikna. And how in the world would he have an opportunity to say that there's such a thing called tefillas hamusaf? There was no av that would have started the tefillah of musaf. So therefore, the Gemara says, yes, tefillas of istiknum asmechilum rabbanon akarbanos. Now, when I think about this, I don't think that necessarily B'Shub Levi had to disagree that the avos didn't daven. Does he have to say that? Is it an argument in Pshat? It's very clear from the Pesukim by Yashim Avram Babaker Al Mokum Asher Omar Sham that you go back, turn the page. What did he do the day before? He was davening for Stein. So it seems obvious that you may not call tefillah shachas, but we call it fine. But does B'Shub Levi have to fundamentally disagree and say the avos didn't daven? No. But nevertheless, it comes out even in contradiction to Rechanina, who holds that tefillas for avos tiknum, cannot say that that was the exclusion of karbanos. He has to hold that the avos were attacking the tefillas initially, but we get the structure in terms of like when you're allowed to say them. We get that from the karbanos. That's how we get to connect it to tamidin. And of course, when it comes to the karban musaf, that only is because of karbanos. That had nothing to do with the avos. That's what he says. From Musaf, he agrees that one's from Karbanos. Not what he agreed. Okay. So that was really finishing up the Gemara until Sudas we wanted to do on Friday. Now we're starting an Abachal Gemara here. The Gemara says as follows. Rabbi Yehuda told us in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda said that when it came to Shachris, you have until Arba Shas. This is like the classic question that I think they ask like on the LSAT or the GMAT or these kind of tests, right? When you say that you can ask it mathematically, what's the difference between one? How many numbers are there between 1 and 5? 1 and 5, you say there's 4 numbers, or 5 minus 1, so that's 4. But if you actually would count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you'll end up counting 5 numbers. And it's meant to be like a little bit of a trick in your brain. That's how I think about Av B'chlal. The way I think about it is, when Yehuda says Av B'chlal, or Av B'chlal, what he's talking about here is in the morning, that he says you have until 4 hours in the day to say Shachris. What's 4 hours in the day? You might say, oh, you have 4 hours in the day, if it's a 12-hour day, you have from 6 to 10. Right? That's when you can say Shachris till. But that's not actually correct. It's not 6 to 10. Not 7, 8, 9, 10. It actually starts from 6. 6 to 7 is 1 hour. 7 to 8 is the second hour. 8 to 9 is the third hour. 9 to 10 is the fourth hour. 9 to 10 is the fourth hour. By the time you hit 10, you've already hit 4 hours. All right, so when somebody says, oh, they had their birthday, how old are you? 40. What do you mean you're 40? You're now in your 40th year, right? Right? You're um when somebody is turning 13, he's already lived 13 years. Yeah? You're going now in your next year. So when we're saying, right, because before you turn 1, you're living in your whole first year. Somebody turns 40, he's already lived 40 years. Now in his 41st year, right? So Rabbi Yehuda is saying, on Arbashas, is he saying that you have until 10? Or is he saying that you have until the fourth hour, meaning until 9? It sounds a little confusing because it sounds like 6, 10, 9 is only 3 hours. But no, it's really already the fourth hour. Good? That's the Gemara's question over here. So the Gemara says, doesn't mean including the fourth hour, meaning that you have it from 9 till 10, there's no problem, you can still down chakras. Or is it that you only have until 9, because that's the fourth hour. Here's a cute Taisus. We should do the bottom Taisus. Taisus asks that there's a Gemara Nida, that the Gemara says the bottom Taisus, that kol shiurei chachamim lahachmir chutz mikigor shel ksamim. That normally, whenever chachamim give shiurim, it's to be machmir. So to say that you have a question, do you say I'm b'chal, Taisus asks, I don't understand why it's the question. You should say that you want to be machmir. So mig machmir means that you should only have the option to do until 9. That will be a chumrah. You have to daven. You can't wake up late. His answer is a very cute answer. V'yesh leimar yamri ad ve'ad b'chlal yesh by gam chumrah shei yispala. Right. So what does Taisus say? Taisus says that even if you say ad ve'ad b'chlal that you have until 10, that's also a chumrah. That's not giving him extra time. That's making him daven. Right. So that's also could be a chumrah. Or as I like to put it, is every one person's kula is another person's chumrah, right? There's no, you can always make the argument that one thing from one perspective is a kula, but for somebody else, it's a chumrah. Okay. And v'lo yamin and avos mani batal karban if I feel amazing, right? So even if somebody's amazed, he didn't wake up or whatever it is, you still tell them that you have to daven. You have to daven. Okay. So the Gemara wants to know: do you say ad b'chal or ad v'lo b'chal? So Tashma says the Gemara Yehuda Eimer. We had in our Mishnah, the Mishnah said ad plaga mincha. Rabbi Yehuda told us in the Mishnah that you're able to daven mincha until plag. Now, I amers b'shlama ad v'lo ad b'chal. Right? If you're gonna say that Rabbi Yehuda holds ad v'lo ad b'chal, meaning that Rabbi Yehuda said that you have to daven until plag mincha to daven mincha. Remember, according to Rabbi Yehuda, we're talking about plag mincha achroina, right? We're talking about plag mincha tana. So if you said that he holds ad v'lo ad b'chlal, then it makes sense. How you have a distinction between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan? I mean, according to Rabbi Yehuda, when can you daven mincha until 4:45, and according to the Rabbanan, when can you daven mincha until Shkia, right? Until 6. So it makes a difference. If you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, you hold like the Chachamim. However, but if you say what? If you say ad ve'ad b'chal, meaning that according to Rabbi Yehuda, then that you have until plag mincha achroina, but it includes plag mincha achroina. It means you have the period of time of the second plag to say mincha, meaning that you have until when? Shkia. So you could say mincha until 6. The same way like who? Like the Rabbanan. So if that's the case, I'm turning now to Chavz Dayan. Amers ad ve'ad b'chal Rabbi Yehuda, hainu Rabbanan. Now what's the difference? What's the difference then between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan? It sounds like they're saying the same exact shita. Says the Gemara, Elamai, what do you have to say? Ad v'loy ad b'chal. You must have to say that we are holding ad v'loy ad b'chal. And practically what that means then is there is a difference between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. According to Rabbi Yehuda, they will daven mincha until plag mincha achrayna, which means until 4:45. And according to the Rabbanan, you can daven mincha until shkia, which means you have that extra hour and 15 minutes. Says the Gemara, 1 second. You're just proving now from this statement of Rabbi Yehuda that you have until Plag Mincha that he must hold ad the loy ad bechlal, and therefore you have a difference between Yehuda and the Rabbanon. But there's another part that we have to talk about. That is, when it came to Musaf, we said it's not machlokes also between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanon. According to Rabbi Yehuda, right, you have until the 7th hour to daven to do the Musaf. According to Rabbanon, Musaf is the whole day. And over there, you see another difference. What's the difference over here? Says the Gemara, Elamai Aval Abachal. Emma Sefer V'Sham Musaf and Kalayim. The Mishnah told us that by Musaf you could daven the whole day. Rabbi Yehuda, Imrad Sheva Shoes. Rabbi Yehuda says no, you can only daven until 7 hours Musaf. V'Tanya, we have a brayso that teaches us if a person has in front of them two tefillas, right? What are the two tefillas that they have? Achas shel musaf ve'achas shel mincha. He has to daven two tefillas, one of musaf, one of mincha. So what should he do? Mispalal shel mincha ve'achar kach shel musaf. First he should daven mincha, then he should daven musaf. Shezu tedira v'zu ena tedira. Because one is normative, one is regular, and we know Tadav She'ena Tadav Tadav Kaidam. So since Mincha you do every day, and Musaf you do rarely, you should do the Tadav first. Do Mincha, then do Musaf. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, no, Mispal Shal Musaf, Achar Kach Shal Mincha. Of course you have to daven Musaf before you daven Mincha. Why? Shezu Aiveres, Shezu Ein Aiveres, because your Musaf prayer is about to be finished. But your Mincha prayer you have time for. So you should do. It's not a question here of Tadav She'ena Tadav that we don't say Tadav Kaidem. Who agrees that Tadav She'ena Tadav Kaidem? But that's only when you have situations where you have options to do two mitzvahs. So which one should you pick? Pick the normal one. Pick the one that's regular. It's a big Musar Haskell in life. Most people get attracted to the things that are rare, and they always want to focus on that. And the Torah is always about the regularity, doing things with a meaning, with a tadiras. That's always where the secret is of success. In any event, Rabbi Yehuda is telling to you, no, it's not a situation I don't hold of Tadav and Tadav Kaidam. Tadav She'en Tadav Kaidam. Of course I hold of that. But that's only when you have two mitzvahs that are equal in terms of their time that you could do them. But here I don't. One is a mitzvah Iveres. Musaf is going to be finished very soon. So if I have a mitzvah Iveres and a mitzvah She'en Iveres, the mitzvah Iveres is going to trump over the mitzvah that's She'en Iveres. Not because you don't hold Tadav, but because mitzvah Iveres is Kadim. So Rabbi Yehuda says, you have to have Musaf first, and then Mincha, Shezu Iveres, Zu Ein Iveres. Now the Gemara explains, what does that mean? If you hold, Rabbi Yehuda, that we say Ad V'Ad B'chal, it means when Rabbi Yehuda says they have until Sheva Shoyes, they have until the 7th hour. What does that mean? How long is the 7th hour until? Until the end of the 7th hour, till and including. What's the 7th hour? 12 to 1 is the 7th hour. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, if he holds Ad V'Ad B'chal on the 7th hour, that means he says that you have until 1 to daven Musaf. So then, that's why I can have a situation where you have a conflict. You have a mincha and a musaf. Mincha, you can start davening from Sheish Shas and Maps. I mean, you can start davening mincha, as we said, until from 12:30, and musaf you can daven until 1. So if I have a situation where I didn't daven musaf yet, and it's 12:30, so then I'll have a question: do I do the tadir, which is mincha, or do I do the iveres, which is musaf? And Yehuda is saying, pick the iveres, because you're going to lose that at 1. Whereas according to Rabbanan, since you have all day for both, right? Even though Musaf starts earlier in the day than Mincha, Mincha starts at 12:30. But once you hit 12:30, from 12:30 to 6, you can do Musaf or Mincha. So then you pick the Tadir. But according to Rabbi Yehuda holds that you only have until 1, so then you have to pick Musaf first. But what does that end up meaning? Is that Rabbi Yehuda holds that when he says over his Zmanim, he holds Ad V'Ad B'chlal. And what do we say at the beginning? We said that Rabbi Yehuda has to hold Ad V'Lo B'chlal, because if he says Ad V'Ad B'chlal, then Rabbi Yehuda is going to end up being the Rabbanan. He's going to end up saying that you have Mincha until Shkia. So says the Gemara, But if you're going to hold how are you going to ever have Musaf and Mincha at the same time? We have a conflict. And once you're going to have the tefillah of Mincha, meaning at 12:30, is already gone from Musaf because Musaf is only able to be davened until the 7th hour, which means until 12, and that's it. Says the Gemara, right? And it's obviously very confusing, right? In a sense, right? Because normally we would say if you have it only until 12, you say Achatzos. Right? And here he's saying Ad Sheva Shos, but you say Avalai B'chal, well, it ends up being at the same time, right? So maybe by that alone you should know that you mean Ad B'chal, but we're not going to get into that. I'm not sure if that's discussed or not. Elamai says the Gemara Ad B'chal. So it must be that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you say Ad B'chal. That's how you have a situation where you could daven until 1. That's how you have a situation where Mincha and Musaf can conflict, and that's why you have to pick Musaf over Mincha, because for Musaf you only have until 1, and for Mincha you have until Shkia. Good. Says the Gemara, okay, but I have a problem. Kasha Reisha. If we're now saying that Rabbi Yehuda must hold Ad B'chal, then when it comes to Mincha, then he says you do it Ad Plaga Mincha. That means Ad B'chal. That means he holds including Plag Mincha, which means that he holds until Shkia, which means that there's no difference between his opinion and the Rabbanan's opinion. Says the Gemara, Elamai Ad B'chal Kasha Reisha Ma'ika ben Rabbi Yehuda l'Rabbanan. On that, the Gemara answers, Mi Savris the high Plag Mincha, quote unquote, right? That. Why do you think that Plag Mincha that Rabbi Yehuda is saying that you have until Plag Mincha to daven was Plag Achrona Kamar? Why are you saying that he meant that it is the second half of the Mincha Tana? Right? To be clear, remember the line of the Brachot on Chavav Beis. What did Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda said, we had a Brachot, the Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Aimer Plag Mincha Achrona. We're talking about the Plag Mincha Achrona. There was no question about it, what he was talking about. He's not talking about Plag Mincha Gedolah, he's talking about Plag Mincha Tana. That's for sure. As Rashi beautifully explains, when Rabbi Yehuda is talking about Plag Mincha, look at Rashi here, Plag Mincha. Plag, you thought, Plag Achrona Kamar, Plag Rishona Kamar. Says Rashi, Plag Rishona Shal Mincha Achrona. Right? Ve'ad Bechlal. What are we talking about when we said Rabbi Yehuda Shita about Mincha? According to Rabbi Yehuda, you have until Plag Mincha. We said, which Plag Mincha? There's 2 Plags. Mincha Gedol, Mincha. We said, okay, Mincha Tana. We said, okay, Ab Bechlal. If it's Ab Bechlal, then it's going to end up being the same as Shkia, which is be the Shita of the Rabbanan. Says Mana, you misunderstood what we were trying to say from Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, Misa versus the high Plag Mincha Plag Achrona Kamar. Do you think that when Yehuda said that you go from Mincha until Plag Mincha and you say Ad B'chal, that meant until and including this latter part of Mincha Tana? No. Plag Rishayna Ka'amar. He's talking about the Mincha Tana, the first half of Mincha Tana. That's what he's talking about. V'hachi Ka'amar. And this is what he was trying to say. Emas nafik plag rishona v'ayo plag achrona. When is it that the plag rishona is leaving and the plag achrona is coming in? When it's 5 o'clock minus a quarter, meaning at 4:45. That is to say, the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda that we saw in Chavav Beis, that Rabbi Yehuda says you could daven mincha until plag mincha, and Rabbi Yehuda explained that meant mincha tana, mincha achrona. He wasn't saying that is Ad B'chlal, that his focus is on the second half of the second of Mincha Tana. His focus is on the first half of Mincha Tana. So Rabbi Yehuda is telling you Ad Plaga Mincha, and we say Ad B'chlal, it's on the first half of Mincha Tana, which means to say that you have until what do you call? You have from 9.5 hours. The Ad B'chal, so you have from 9:30 in the day, meaning from 3:30 in the afternoon, the Ad B'chal until 4:45. Does that make sense? Good? Okay. So now we know that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you could say Ad B'chal, The only confusion is what he meant when he said plaga mincha, and we're saying it doesn't mean ad ve'ad b'chlal on the second half of mincha tana. He means ad ve'ad b'chlal on the first half of mincha tana, which will come out from 3:30 to 4:45. Good. Okay. Says the Gemara. Amar Rav Nachman, Afanan Amitanin. I have a raya. I have a raya to this position of Rabbi Yehuda. Because I have another Mishnah that tells us as follows. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava heit chamisha dvarim. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava gave a testimony about 5 things. Shemimana saktana. Right, everyone's familiar with miyun. Right, miyun is when a father passed away. A father has the right to do kedushin for his daughter Daraisa. And if the father passed away, so they don't want the daughter to go to Tarbis Ra, so the brother or the mother can marry her off as a ktana. But that marriage is not a daraisa. That marriage is a rabbanon because they don't have the power to marry off. And when she becomes a gedil, then she could choose, if she wants to stay married to him or not. If she decides not to, so she doesn't need a get. She could just do mian. Mian would, in theory, as Rashi points out over here, would make the bias into bias nus, but nevertheless, that is permitted. However, there are certain times where the rabbis insist that this young girl do a mian. And what is the situation? They have 2 brothers who are married to 2 sisters. Now we're talking for Anan about the Tzavot Shabuda Chassid, where he says that one of the things that he says one shouldn't do, but it is not followed today, and there are people that have 2 brothers who marry 2 sisters. But it comes up a situation, one of the brothers passed away without children. And then you have a situation where Zibum, obviously, if you're married to a sister, you can't do Yibum. But in a situation like this where you're not really married, on Drabonon, so the rabbis say to the girl, they teach her to do mian, basically in order to allow the zika, which is daraisa, from the brother who passed away on a marriage daraisa, to be able to take place. So that's one thing that Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava testified to. Second thing that he testified to was Shemesina Seisha Pied Echon, right? You have a husband who went away to Medina Sayyam or Mekel over there. Normally we have 2 Edim, but for a woman, says it shouldn't be an almana forever. Essentially an aguna forever, we allow her to get married up to Echon. She again explains over here we're talking about a situation where you had a chicken where it pecked at the baby when the baby's born, the I'm not sure what it's called, the cortex, the cerebral cortex, whatever, the baby's head at the top of the head is very soft and it stays soft for quite a while. So a chicken pecked at that and it killed the baby. They gave the chicken skila. Because even though the pasuk tells us the Shpatim all about the shar, but it's not just limited to a shar. It's any animal that causes the death. And by the way, they used to hold trials of animals in the medieval era. They would hold still trials of animals that kill people, cows and pigs. They mamish held trials all the way in. Yeah, like literally trials. And they would punish the animal the way they would punish humans. Yeah. The al yain ben abarim yoyim nasech al gabei mizbeach, and wine when it hits 40 days. So as Rashi explains, that wine is not called yain mikita anymore. It's called yain gomer. It could be used on the mizbeach. That would be what the Torah says, yain mishecher. Now, obviously, it may not be the best wine. Older wine we know is normally better, but nevertheless, it's still kosher already as wine. The al-tamid shel shachar. This is the key one that we need for our purposes here. The al-tamid shel shachar shekar ba'ar b'shoyes. And on the Tamid Shal Shachar, that was brought by 4 hours. What does it mean that was brought by 4 hours? It means, as Rashi says, look at Rashi, Be'ar B'shoyes, V'sulai, right, and it was brought in the 4th hour, and not any more than that. Alma Rabbi Yehuda Sfirle, and you see that he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. The Karma Be'ar B'shoyes, and it was brought in the 4th hour. Alma Rabbi Yehuda V'ad V'ad B'chal. So you see a few things. Number one, right, you see that you hold like a Yehuda, that you hold like it's the 4th hour. That's when you could do the Talmud. And number 2, it's in the 4th hour that you could do the Talmud. That means you do from 9 to 10, and you don't stop at 9. The Moshe Shramina, that is a good raya. That we say Ava Abachal Shramina. The Gemara then concludes on Rav Kana Halach Rabbi Yehuda Hel V'Tzam Bechirta Kavasei. The halach is like Rabbi Yehuda because we say this in the Bechirta. What's the Bechirta? Rashi says a duyos kari bechirta. A duyos, the Mishnah in a duyos is called bechirta. Shehalacha ka'is and a duyos. We're literally going to have this Gemara here, and then the next week, the next few days, we're going to talk about the situation where Gamliel was deposed, and Gamliel being deposed caused what? Rabbi Gamliel's being deposed caused the Beis Medrash to open up, and they ended up having a whole mass people come who wanted to learn. They weren't allowed into the yeshiva of Rabbi Gamliel. Then they came in under Blessed and Azariah, and one of the things that they did during that period was the mission of Eduyos, which we hold like 100%, and that's called the Bechirta. So Rav Kahana says that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Even though he's a single man to Amar against the Tanakam, we nevertheless hold like him. We hold like him that you have for Shachris until the 4th hour, but until means until and including the 4th hour, which means that you have until 10 o'clock in the morning. That would be the halacha according to Rabbi Yehuda. Taisus points out here, we don't really have time to go into the Taisus in detail, but Taisus points out you don't usually see a Taisus like this kind of a thing. But if you look in our Mishnah, the Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad Zayin Sharis when it came to Musaf, and it puts it in parentheses. The reason it puts it in parentheses and doesn't include it is because Taisus here says that Umiya b'chala svarim hayishanim. If you look at the last of the wide lines in the top Taisus, Taisus Umiya b'chala svarim hayishanim einay. It's not in his checking out of various different old Mishnayos. So he says in the next line, if Taisus v'im time for every lama hisker I said b'mishnah. So why didn't Rabbi bring it in the Mishnah? Why didn't Rabbi bring down that ad Zayin Shayes from Musaf? Why didn't he bring it in the Mishnah? So Taisus answers, because he doesn't hold like him. In this that he says that you have until 7 hours to do it. But in this that he holds like him that he has until 4 hours in the day, and we say then tzvir like Kavasei. Why does he hold like him? Because it's not an idiot, so therefore he brought it down. So what's Taisus intimating? This is intimating something that we discussed already with as a problem. In the Mishnah it specifically said, we quoted it in our Torah Shabbat Peh classes on Sunday. What did it say? You remember the Mishnah Eduyos? Right before, the Mishnah Eduyos, right in the beginning of Eduyos, the Mishnah, I think it was Mishnah Hay, right? Mishnah Dal, Mishnah Hay, the Mishnah told us. Then why do we bring down in the Mishnah the opinions that we agree with, the opinions that we disagree with? In order to allow options in the future time. If somebody's going to hold like one other opinion that would be a minority opinion, and it wasn't in the Mishnah, then no one can hold like it. But if you have it in the Mishnah, then you say, I'm Saimach on this Das Yachad, then they can become the Das of the Rabbim later. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to create your own opinions against the Mishnah. So I leave this as a turkey, and I don't know the answer to this. I don't understand this thesis. Meaning, I can understand that there's a difference in gear size. I can understand. But to come up with this as my answer to why the gears will be different, it's a shver to me this day. Okay, finish the Gemara. So now we say on the Tamid of the morning that they brought into the 4th hour. So the Gemara now wants to discuss a Zaytika point, but interesting one nonetheless, which is about the month. Because the Gemara, man tanalo the Tanan who is the man who holds that when the mun would be falling down every day, that it would become melting, it would become disgusting after when the sun would get hot. V'cham hashemesh, the pasuk says, and it will become v'namas, it will become melted, it will become mias. So man tana lohadet now. Who's the one who learned the cham hashemesh v'namas ba'ar b'shas? Who's the one who learned that when the sun will become hot, that it will become melted in the 4th hour? Does that mean in the 4th hour, or maybe it means in the 6th hour? What exactly do you mean? Where is it indicating in the pasuk that v'cham hashemesh v'nama should be the 4th hour versus the 6th hour? Says the Gemara, when the pasuk says by Avram Avinu, Vayera Hashem al Avram, right? Avram is just had a bris, and what does the pasuk say? V'hu yoshev pesach ha'oil kechayim hayayim. He was standing or sitting, by his tent, right outside. Hashem had to remove the cham in Artik. It was a very hot day. He was sitting there, kechayim hayam, in the heat of the day. So we see a difference between chayim of the day and the chayim of the shemesh, right? One is chayim of the day, which is the heat of the day. That's the hottest part of the day. And one is the chayim hashemesh, when the sun is becoming hot. So clearly, kechayim hayam is what? The middle of the day. And the chayim hashemesh has to be earlier in the day. Says the Gemara, or that must be talking about 6 hours into the day. That must be talking about chatzos. So then Hamani Mekayim V'cham Hashem Shanamas. And then I understand there's a difference between the sun getting hot and the heat of the day. So when is the heat of the day? 12 hours. Meaning 6 o'clock. If the day is 12 hours, 6 hours into the day, which would be chatzos, that is choy mayom. When is the cham hashemesh, that the sun is getting hot? That is 4 hours into the day. Says the Gemara, Hamani became b'cham hashemesh v'nomas b'arba shos. Mani, says the Gemara, lo Rabbi Huda v'lo Rabbanan. It's not like Rabbi Huda or the Rabbanan. Why not? Because he Rabbi Huda l'arba shos not mitzafru. Because according to Rabbi Huda, when do you have the ability to say when do you have the ability to daven? You have until the 4th hour. We said av abba chalash means you have until 10. So from 9 to 10 is still considered the morning. It's still considered safra. But Rabbanan ad chatzos. But according to the Rabbanan, you have until chatzos. Meaning that until chatzos is not mitzafru. That is still the morning. Now let's look at Rashi over here. So Rashi tells us, Mani, who is the Tan in the wide lines of Rashi on the bottom? Mani, hada mashma the arba lav boikeru. This, what we're saying is mashma, that the v'cham hashemesh v'nomas is ba'arba shoes, and we're saying that the sun is becoming hot by the 4th hour, which would sound like it's not going to be considered morning anymore after that. Why not? Says Rashi, because if you look at the pasuk says vayukatu say ba'boiker v'cham hashemesh v'nomas. Right, they would collect it in the morning, and then the sun would get hot, and they would the leftovers would melt. So what would melt? V'nomas hanaiser u'midemuki v'nomas ba'arba shoyes. Now that we're saying that what would melt would be at the 4th hour, meaning at 9. Mechad lav zman lakitu. That means that it's no longer zman of lakita after that. V'lav bleikem mikri. So the idea of vayukatu asay ba'boiker v'cham hashemesh v'nomas teaches us that according to this man, the Amar, you should only have until 9. It's only after 9 is going to be called biker. After 9 to 10 is not biker anymore. So that can't be Rabbi Huda because he holds until you have until 10. According to Chachamim, because they hold you have until 12. Doesn't matter. I could answer. It could be either one. It could be either one. It could be according to the Rabbanon. It could be according to the Rabbanon because the Rabbanon say that you have. The pasuk says you could say biker. So you have 2 bikers. So when did they collect it? At the first of the 2 bikers. Since you have the day, according to Rabbanan, is from the 6th until 12. Biker means you have 2 bikers. You have 6 to 9, 9 to 12. So they collected it until 9, meaning the first biker. That's what we're discussing. But I say Rabbi Huda, it could also be Rabbi Huda. How can it be Rabbi Huda? Because according to Rabbi Huda, it also says biker. What is this first biker of 2 bikers? It's to bring it back 1 hour. So normally a biker is until 10, but we see biker, you have it here until 9. Fine. So either way, it can go according to both of them. Says the Gemara, but everybody nevertheless agrees that it would become melted, it would become disgusting by 9 o'clock, by the 4th hour. My mashma, what's the mashma is to get that? The sun would get hot and it will become melted. And what is the hour that the sun was hot and the shade is cool? I would say that is going to be into the 4 hours. I just want to do another couple of lines from the next Gemara. It says the Gemara, you have mincha until the evening. Rav Chizda said to Rabbi Yitzchak, when it came to Shachris, we said that the halacha is like Rabbi Huda, because it said that the halacha in the Mishnah in Idi is like Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda testified that the halacha is like Rabbi Huda. What's the halacha about mincha? Do we say that the halacha is like Rabbi Huda, or is it like the Tanakam they have until the Shkia? Rabbi Chizda was quiet; he wasn't saying anything. He didn't say a word. Rabbi Chizda next day and Rabbi Chizda then tried to answer for himself. He said, "Midirav matzis or Shabbos be'erev Shabbos and be'od Yom Rav daven erev Shabbos." He would daven on the Kabbalah Shabbos. He would daven for Shabbos davening. He would daven on Friday in the middle of the day. So Shema Mina like Rabbi Huda. So you see that the halacha is like Rabbi Huda, that you could watch. You could bring the davening of Shabbos into the middle of the day. So you see that according to Rabbi Huda, you're able to daven already right afterwards. Right, that you have only until the plag in order to be able to daven mincha, and after that you could read daven for the Ma'ariv, you could read daven for Shabbos. So says the Gemara, what's not a raya? 1 second. Says the Gemara, Adarab, the Rav Huna for Rabbanan will have matzah order, but you see that the Rav Huna and the Rabbanan would only daven until Shabbos in the evening. So Shema and Allah Rabbi Huda, they don't like Rabbi Huda. You can only daven the Ma'ariv, you can only daven Shabbos after Shkia. So says the Gemara, 1 second. Now that we don't have a clear mitzvah as to who the halach is like Rabbi Huda or the Rabbanan, the Ovid Kamar Ovid is Ovid Kamar Ovid. You could do either way. All right, we'll have to continue tomorrow.